Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and perhaps even good night to all of you. And thank you for each and every one of you for being together with us here today. Annika and I are delighted to co-moderate our session on Forward Together, taking stock of the environmental peace building landscape and share the coming discussions with you. So my name is Päivi Lujala. I am professor of human geography at the University of Oulu in Finland. And I have conducted research on various aspects of environment, peace, conflict, and development for over 20 years now. I'm also board member of the Environmental Peacebuilding Association. And my co-moderator today is Annika from the Geneva Peacebuilding platform. And Annika, perhaps you could say a few words about yourself.
Hello. And I'm assuming that the plenary must have just let out because we are having a flood of people coming in the door. So hello and welcome to everybody who's coming in. My name is Annika Erickson Pearson and I work for the Geneva Peacebuilding platform. I'm a community manager there. So right now I'm managing a sort of Geneva, Europe-based community on environment, climate, conflict, and peace, including work on the road to Geneva, of which Päivi will talk a little bit more about. But I'm really happy to see so many of you here today and coming in the door. So I'm going to go back to the Zoom management here, but it's great to see all of your faces.
Yeah, like Annika said, it's our privilege and pleasure on behalf of Environmental Peacebuilding Association and Geneva Peacebuilding Platform to welcome those of you that have been with us previously, but especially those who are new to the environmental peacebuilding community. So welcome. A few words about the road to Geneva, which Annika already referred to. So this session doubles as an event on the road to the Geneva. And the road to Geneva builds on momentum for the second international conference on environmental peacebuilding that will be held in Geneva in Switzerland in February 2022. And this process, Road to Geneva, is an inclusive and consultative process, and our aim is to elevate and diversify the voices in environmental peacebuilding. And through this process, we also hope to learn from the regional insights and uncover and identify themes and issues that we should take up in the second conference that is to come. But today in this session here at the PeaceCon, Annika and I would like to facilitate a conversation about the environmental peacebuilding's future from different angles. A few words then about environmental peacebuilding. Environmental peacebuilding emerged as an important field for scholars and practitioners at the end of the Cold War. And it operates at the intersection of natural resource management, environment and environment change, and then conflict and peace. Broadly said, environmental peacebuilding refers to efforts aimed at building more peaceful relations and to mitigate tensions and violence between people, groups, and countries through different types of environmental cooperation, natural resource management, and also through adapting to changes in environment or to environmental hazards. It still is an emerging field, and environmental peacebuilding in itself, at least for me, it's a vague concept. It's perhaps quite ill-defined still. But I thought that in order to understand and discuss and debate environmental peacebuilding and scope, one way is to think through three continuums. One is peacebuilding itself. It's often equated, like you know, to the post-conflict peacebuilding after war. But for others, it can equally well be about avoiding tensions in the first place, like in the case of climate change. And many talk about the conflict life cycle that includes all the different phases of the conflict, also the build-up of the tension prior to conflict, but then also about the onset, the conflict itself, conflict resolution, and then peace-building. The second continuum regards the role of natural resources or the physical environment in conflict and in peace. natural resources or environment can be the root cause of the conflict. It can be a trigger. It can be an enabling factor. They can sustain the conflict. They can contribute to its intensity, or the conflict may have nothing to do about the natural resources or environment, but it still can play a role in supporting conflict-affected populations or in the peace-building efforts. And the third continuum I'm going to take up here is that what exactly is the role of physical environment in peace-building? At one extreme, it can entail, for example, full conservation of certain area, like the peace parks. In other end, it can entail a full exploitation of an area, like in some extractive industry projects. And then, of course, everything between in most cases. So perhaps not surprisingly, environmental peace building's impact on the peace and peacefulness is debated. And at least for some of us, including me, it's a little bit unclear where we stand and where we are going, and perhaps not least where we should be going. So I'm prepared, and hopefully you are as well, to be challenged today, to become excited and also inspired. Today's session, so we have 3 questions that we have put up in a way to kick off the discussion, conversation. I think Annika has the 3 questions. She will pull them up. And these are the questions we would like to challenge you a little bit on today, and to look at them from different angles and from the experiences that you have. The first question that we have there is the question, so what are we missing from the environmental peacebuilding conversation, both in terms of substance and the voices heard? And here we will listen a pre-recorded message from Dr. Elaine Shaw from the Sheffield Institute for International Development, where she is a Global Challenges Research Fellow. Elaine has had for a long time had a keen interest in environmental peacebuilding through community conservation.
I wanted to address one of the questions for the panel on what is missing from the environmental peacebuilding conservation, both in terms of substance and voices. I think that when we look at environmental peacebuilding and the way that it's grown over the decades, we saw a lot of outreach and engagement with the security sector and the militaries to the humanitarian sector, looking at what the UN efforts are around peace building post-conflict and during conflict, and then looking at what states and conservation NGOs can do in terms of environmental cooperation, shared natural resource governance, etc. But what's been missing kind of in a lot of that development is the voices of kind of the indigenous and traditional communities that often are at the forefront of environmental protection. And this is kind of also, I think, one of the areas where we're missing a lot of both traditional and indigenous knowledge around conflict resolution processes that are endogenous to places and to their ecosystems. So sometimes I call this the kind of the difference between, we have the big D, little d development, and also big P, little p peace building and environmental peace building. And I think when we start to maybe listen to or further engage indigenous and traditional or local communities in environmental peacebuilding and conflict resolution processes, we might actually see a shift also in the concept of environmental peacebuilding or the theory of environmental peacebuilding, which I think has been defined mostly around the idea of human-to-human cooperation around the environment to resolve human-to-human conflicts. And I think that we can actually push this and expand it outwards to really think about a more than human kind of environmental peacebuilding with reconciliation between human and non-human relationships. And this is really what we need in terms of, when we're looking at the level of biodiversity loss and ecosystem degradation that we're seeing around the world. And I think that in kind of amplifying these sort of indigenous and traditional even environmental cosmologies, if we want to call it that, so that kind of more than human perspective could surface a lot stronger. And that could also help us to address a lot of the conflicts that we're actually seeing within the environment community. Conflicts arising out of conservation, a lot of the fear that now persists around, the expansion of protected areas, half Earth, 50% of the planet protected by 2050, and the possibility that this could forcibly displace or even violently remove indigenous and local communities from the lands and territories of life that they have been protecting and living with for time immemorial. It also means that, we could be looking at better addressing the issues of environmental defenders who are at the forefront of conflicts with extractive industries, including industrial agriculture, mining, logging, etc. And looking at how environmental conservation itself could be more conflict sensitive, and better integrating the communities that are actually protecting nature in places that are outside of protected areas. So I think that these are some of the things that environmental peace building could grow to include more broadly. And I think that might speak to also the conversation or the question around how can we support international action to build a better future. And I think that this means being a much more diverse network within the environmental peace building community itself. So thanks for this opportunity to share a little something. And I'm sorry that I will miss the discussion that all of you will have in the panel. Just a matter of time difference, but I invite anyone who's interested to please reach out and connect with me either by email at e.hsiao@sheffield.ac.uk or on Twitter at the number 1 Earth and then the number 4 Peace. 1 Earth for Peace. Thanks, and I hope you all have a really interesting conversation.
Then the second question that we would like you to wait on is about what are the key trends of the environmental peace building conversation and perhaps even what they should be and where they should go, where should we be moving to. And here we will hear some thoughts from Janani Vivekananda from Adelphi, where she is the head for program climate diplomacy and security. Janani has a vast experience from research and fieldwork within the field of climate conflict and natural resource management and how these relate to peace building.
Hello everyone, my name is Janani Vivekananda and I'm the Head of Programme for Climate Diplomacy and Security at Adelphi. Sorry to not be able to join in person, but thank you so much for this space to share a few thoughts remotely on this very important conversation. And taking stock, there are 2 key reflections that I'd like to share. The first is on the importance of shifting our framing narrative around climate change and security. And the other is linked to this. It's about better embracing complexity and the multidimensionality of the issue. So on the first point, we now have a wide acceptance that climate change affects peace and security. But now we need to tackle the so what question. And I think the narrative around climate being a threat multiplier doesn't really help us here, nor do discussions about proving causality. We know that climate change interacts with and compounds pre-existing risks, and in fact creates new risks to peace and security. But my problem with the framing of climate change as a threat multiplier has always been that it doesn't really tell us what to do about this challenge. I think it's more helpful to see climate change as a peace inhibitor, as a core part of the conflict context, and thus a necessary part of any conflict response. It might not be the core driver of a conflict, and that's fine. But it's just part of every conflict story, and therefore it needs to be part of every conflict response. And this is key, because if peace building is to withstand the test of sustainable peace, it really does have to take account of climate change, whether or not climate is a core driver of the conflict in question or not. So I think it's really important to shift the narrative now, to move beyond seeing climate change as simply a threat multiplier, or beyond the search for a direct causal link between climate change and specific tipping points or thresholds where conflict ignites. It's not really about looking for these direct lines of causality, but rather understanding how climate impacts, along with other challenges such as inequality or poor basic service provision, will inhibit prospects for peace, for positive, sustainable peace. And based on this understanding, we'll be better able to pursue approaches to transform conflict to build lasting peace, which can weather these risks. Now, the second point is related to this. We know that conflicts are complex and multidimensional. So when we think about how climate change is a part of this, it's important that we don't simply look for where climate shocks push people into violence and then sparks fly. It's more about looking for where climate change strains, often in very subtle and hard to detect ways, how climate change can strain existing coping capacities. And there are numerous different pathways along which these different mediating factors can be affected. And these, of course, depend entirely on specific contexts. But across the different contexts that I've looked at over 5 continents over 15 years, I found that there's one commonality, and this is quite helpful as a starting point, because it can be otherwise quite overwhelming. And that commonality is around social cohesion. Climate change stresses social cohesion, and social cohesion is incredibly pertinent when it comes to understanding drivers of conflict. So the impacts of climate on natural resources and weather-dependent livelihoods, on food security, all of these things, it strains relationships at every level, within households, across and between different communities, within and across generations, genders, between citizens and the states. And I think this is a space where we can better explore and understand this impact on social cohesion, to better then understand this multidimensionality and this complexity. So I'll leave it there with those two thoughts from my side, and wish you a fantastic discussion. Sorry again to not be able to join, but thank you again for the space and for listening. Bye.
And then the final question that we are putting forward today is how can we promote and support international action to build a better future through environmental peace building? So for those who have joined us in the last few minutes, the 3 questions on that you can see there on the slide, these are the questions that we use to kick off the discussion today. The discussion that we will have today can well go beyond this, and we are not asking you to weigh in on all of them. What we actually ask you to wait on one of them at a time, and then perhaps come back later. But again, welcome to all of you. And now that we are soon about to start, I will let Annika to go through a few housekeeping rules and a little bit more details on how we will do this in practice.
Thank you, Päivi. Yes, hello everybody, welcome. Yeah, I'm here more on the maybe technical side of things with some reminders, such as if you are not speaking, do leave yourself on mute. But we, as Päivi said, what we'd love to do today is really have an interactive discussion. We'll kick off the conversation with 3 folks who have sort of prepared short inputs, but the way that we've sort of conceived this session is that if you want to talk, we're just going to give you 3 minutes to talk. Everybody will have about 3 minutes. There will be moments where I am awkwardly prompting you to move on as you have reached the end of your time. And that's just fine. That's a part of the process. But really, we would love for this to be, I know people say this, we'd love for this to be as interactive as possible, so much that we have planned nothing else other than for you to talk. So please, if you would like to speak, I will put the questions in the chat as well, so that I don't have to have my screen shared the whole time. If you'd like to speak, you can raise your hand in your video. You can click participants at the bottom, and you will find an option there to raise your Zoom hand, so to speak. You can type in the chat and say, I'd like to say something. You can send me a private message, or if nobody is speaking, then I may just call on a couple of people that I know in the audience randomly. You all know who you are. But so that's how this will work. So I encourage you to already, I'll put the questions in the chat to maybe start thinking about what you want to contribute. How would you answer these questions? Where do you think we're going? As Päivi said, it is fairly unclear where we stand and where we're going as a field. And here we all are as a field to have a conversation about this. But to get us started, we did reach out to a couple of folks that we admire and respect, and ask them to make some contributions on the subject. So I will first introduce them and have them speak one at a time. So first we have Miguel Lodonia of the Global Green Growth Institute. Miguel is, among other things, a leader of environmental peacebuilding in Colombia, where he works together with public entities, community-based organizations, and international organizations to implement environmental-related initiatives in conflict-affected areas, and more broadly to support environmental peacebuilding in Colombia and beyond. He has, however, recently moved. So Miguel, over to you, and thank you for joining.
Thank you, Annika. So good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm a proud founding member of the Environmental Peacebuilding Association and recently appointed at the board. So I'd like to share some ideas of my work in Colombia and more broadly on question number one, which is related to the substance and the voices heard. I think related to the substance, one of the things that I'm very much looking forward to is the revealing work that it's being done on monitoring and evaluation, particularly given that it is quite hard to show impact when you develop projects and implement projects, and you try to build a compelling story to donors. So I guess reaching to that point where we have a common understanding and trustworthy mechanisms, indicators, and processes to a straightforward monitoring and evaluation process. I guess that's something that it's very much needed. And there are some encouraging steps now being led by Carl Brook and the Environmental Peacebuilding Association, the Monitoring and Evaluation Interest Group, on a recent Jeff report and some ongoing work with the USIP, developing a toolkit that will provide monitoring and evaluation inputs. Secondly, I would like to point out the fact that I guess one of the encouraging things about the development of the 2030 agenda is that peace and security has finally hit the Sustainable Development Goals. So we have now, luckily, an SDG 16. However, I believe that this is something at a very high level. So I would certainly like to see how this can go below to the field to applicable and practical information that we can relate to one another. So the SDG 16 is quite hard to grasp right now as it is. And it's difficult for instance, for development organizations, or for us as a green growth organization, for instance, reporting on our contribution to SDG 16 is quite challenging because we cannot somewhat reveal how can we do this in a practical manner. Finally, regarding voices, one thing I wish we would have more is private sector voices in the conversation. Companies getting more into the discussions and understanding more if there's a business case behind peace and environmental peace building efforts. I guess I know there are some things being done, but I see a great need of companies being more engaged in that sense. And I would like to also reiterate and emphasize what a previous person that talked was about communities and indigenous communities. I guess that's one of other voices that should be joining more. We would like to have more the people that are at the forefront of the environmental peace building work in the field. It would be very nice to have more of those in the discussions, in the conferences, beyond the scientific language and the papers, and I guess all that practical knowledge and ancestral knowledge would be great to have. Thank you.
Thank you. Only 15 seconds over. That's a pretty good way to start us off on timeliness. Thank you very much, Miguel, and thank you for being here. As I said before, if you have inputs on other questions throughout the conversation, please feel free to come back in. Next, we go to Lauren Reese of the Wilson Center, who is the project director for their Global Risk and Resilience Program. She has for a long time promoted innovative and transdisciplinary solutions to development and security challenges related to environmental change and to natural resource management in the intersection of research, policy, and practice. She's also the managing editor of the New Security Beat, which is the blog of the Wilson Center's Environmental Change and Security Program. So that blog provides a platform for researchers who are trying to translate their findings from environmental peace-building research to a policymaking audience and to practitioners. So Lauren, over to you.
Thanks so much, Annika. And you very kindly promoted me. I'm actually the project director for the Environmental Change and Security Program, which sits underneath the Global Risk and Resilience Program. I appreciate it. Good morning, DC. Thank you, Annika and Päivi, for organizing this great discussion. I can't think of a better way to kick off this week. I'm just going to take 3 quick minutes to make 2 points around the first question of what's missing from environmental peace building, although I'm more inclined to think of these points as areas for continued and future growth versus being outright missing from the discussion. The first point I would make would be around champion recruitment. In a lot of ways, appreciating environmental peace building as a concept isn't a big reach for those already inclined to care about or be working in the environmental space. Whether you're focused on water, land, oceans, biodiversity, et cetera, there's often an inherent recognition of the connections between the health and resilience of environmental systems and the health and resilience of social systems, and an appreciation of how, since the dawn of man, communities and individuals have had to negotiate over shared natural resources. But while there is a growing recognition of the role that environmental change and natural resource management and access plays in conflict and peace building, I think we still have a ways to go when it comes to ensuring that the environment is part of peace and security discussions. For example, in assessments of fragility, conflict, violence, or peace, the environment is not yet naturally or automatically included as an indicator. Often environmental indicators show up implicitly in sort of proxy indices, but they're not always recognized for what they are, that is, environmental indicators. And this doesn't always translate into the inclusion of natural resource management and environment in conflict response for peace building efforts. So my hope is that we can continue to inform and inspire new recruits to environmental peace building, decision makers, practitioners working on the ground, and experts who aren't looking at instability and insecurity through an environmental lens, but through the more traditional security development and diplomacy lenses, with the benefit of an expanded toolbox that includes the environment and natural resource management. In the United States, where the Defense Department takes up so much space, folks like Sherry Goodman and Sharon Burke have been instrumental in helping to translate for the traditional security audience the relevance of environmental security and peace building. So I would say we need more Sherrys and Sharons, but across all of those spaces, not just the defense space. This brings me to my second point, which has actually already been well articulated by Miguel, so forgive me for any repetition, but I do think it bears repeating. To recruit these diverse champions, we need to show in more compelling and evidence-based ways the impact of environmental peace building. We can do this in 2 ways. The first is through the more robust monitoring and evaluation of environmental peace building that Miguel focused on. Done in this space here today, so he can hopefully, but there's plenty of room to do more, and I hope we see growing interest across the diverse community of environmental peace builders. The second way we can show better the impact of environmental peace building is by telling the stories of the incredible work being done on the ground. My former colleague, Megan Parker, wrote a New Security Beat article for us last year on this topic of storytelling. In it, she called environmental peace building the greatest story never told. This idea that by working across borders to address environmental problems, we can build a foundation for a broader peace is not only a powerful concept, it's an incredible story, but it is rarely covered by the mainstream press. So in her piece, Megan outlined 6 great tips on how to better tell the story of environmental peace building. I would just add that another aspect of the benefits of telling these stories, if we do it right, we will successfully bring to the fore and elevate the more diverse and representative voices of those working on environmental peacebuilding, including the indigenous and traditional communities that Elaine spoke about in her video message. So I'll end there. Thank you.
And Lauren, maybe if there's a link to that, maybe it might be helpful if you could drop that in the chat. I think people might find that interesting and helpful.
Of course. Thanks.
Forever. Thank you. Okay, fabulous. Let's see. We have one more. We have Munini here who will share with us before we turn it all over to all of you. And I already see somebody posting in the chat, and that's great. That's exactly what we'll have. So for those of you, I know some people have been walking in the door. What we're here to do today is really just have sort of an open conversation. So I'll repaste the questions in there. But now we go over to Munini Mutuku, who's with the Kenya National Cohesion and Integration Commission. Hopefully I'm not messing up your bio as well. I'm so sorry. She has vast experience from practical work in inclusive mediation, training, and facilitation of community reconciliation dialogues, which of course contributes to environmental peacebuilding within the African region, in particular with relation to resource-based conflicts due to environmental changes. So Munini, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Annika. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, everyone. And thanks for having me. I'll address the first question, what is missing in the conversation? Allow me to start with the substance. What we are missing is the transitional justice discussion, environmental transitional justice. What do I mean? Within the African continent, we're having a lot of countries that are moving from conflict and transitioning into peace. And for the last, at least for the last many years, most of the conflicts that have happened have actually had an element of natural resources. Either the conflict begins because of natural resources or natural resources are caught in between in this conflict. So now that a number of countries are going through transition, we have institutions or transitional justice mechanisms that are being put in place to see that these countries actually transition well. And for instance, in Central African Republic, we had the peace agreement, which actually talked about natural resources. In South Sudan, the comprehensive peace agreement talked about the natural resources. Once these things are mentioned in here, and then we have the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions coming up, then something falls off the gap, and it's the environmental transitional justice issue. It seems to fall off the gap, and it is not followed up. So that is something that we need to pick up so that it's not always falling off the crack, because you cannot only transition the human beings who live in an environment that also needs to transition. When we have pollution within the environment, we need to rehabilitate, remediate. That is part of transitioning. And if that is not addressed, then that's why we see a lot of relapse of these conflicts, because we go back to the natural resource issues that were not transitioned. That is one thing. In reference to voices, the Ubuntu voice needs to keep talking. And what do I mean by the Ubuntu voice? The voice that keeps reminding us of our commonness as human beings. You exist because I exist because you exist. If I pollute my environment, and you exist because I exist, and I exist because you exist, then I pollute yours as well. So if we have to take care of nature, if I have to take care of nature, then I take care of you as well. And I go back to what Elaine was saying, that we also need to transition this Ubuntu voice, not only within the human race, but to the non-biota, that is the environment and those living things that are not human. If the discussion about the COVID-19 is to go by in terms of the wet markets, infections from the wet market that have now transitioned to the human race, going back to the environment, we pollute and we destroy our environment where the animals live, they get sick, and then they're bringing disease to the human race. And we are here, we are all quarantined, wearing masks and having sanitizers. Because of what? Because we have destroyed our environment and nature is being affected. So the Ubuntu voice will keep reminding us, and we need to keep this voice on the table, that we coexist. Humans coexist with nature, and humans coexist with humans. And another voice that we need to keep hearing is the voice from the multinational companies, like one of my colleagues has said, one of the presenters has said, that we need the voice of the private sector in here. because they also affect the environment. And we want to hear what is it that they need to do and we need to do, and we need to collaborate. Because again, back to the Ubuntu voice, I exist because you exist, and you exist because I exist, even as multinational companies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is fantastic. I think the natural place maybe actually at this point is to go to Carl, because what I have now heard from a few folks is we keep coming to this idea of monitoring and evaluation, and I just happen to have the benefit of knowing Carl and seeing his name now coming up in the chat multiple times. So Carl, can I call on you and ask you to give us your thoughts maybe a little bit on monitoring and evaluation around environmental peace building for 3 minutes?
Sure. I would also welcome, I thought I saw Tamara Destray Pearson among the members here. I'd be very interested in her thoughts on this. I think a lot of it goes back to what Janani said about complexity, that we're dealing with a very complex set of dynamics, and the solutions are often only partial solutions. They take a long time to manifest, long after your funding's over. And there are all sorts of challenges that come with both monitoring and evaluation. We often lump those together and just say monitoring and evaluation, or M&E, but those are two separate processes that ask two different questions. And we often focus more on the evaluation side. But I think that this question of how we think about our interventions needs to be better integrated with how we evaluate. Are we on track with this intervention? What are the unintended consequences? What do we learn from that intervention that might inform future interventions? And a lot of these challenges for environmental peace building, they are challenges for environmental governance, they're challenges for peace building more broadly. But I think having them at that intersection of kind of the environmental world and the peace building world adds another dimension of complexity, because there often are modalities and indicators and things like that that are in one realm, and then you go to another realm and it's done differently. So this question of how you do monitoring and how you do evaluation at that intersection is something that people have not really thought through as we would like them to. They've had to do it because this is a condition of receiving funding. But I also think that kind of in the big picture view of things, this is essential to the future of environmental peace building. If we can't show our impacts, how are you going to get funders to support this? And so I think that this is really important, and we, as Miguel noted, we have started, we being ELI, Environmental Peace Building Association, and UNEP, along with a number of leading practitioners and scholars from around the world, have started a process to take stock of what have we learned. And the first, we had a meeting last Tuesday on what are the different ways of thinking about environmental peace building, because that influences or might influence how we do monitoring and evaluation. And tomorrow there will be a second consultation around how do we develop and design a toolkit. And so what are the lessons we've seen from other toolkits around M&E? And one of the challenges that we are wrestling with is this tension between utility and comprehensiveness. So I will end there. No, it's a very real challenge. And I wonder if for the event tomorrow, if you have a link that you haven't put in the chat already. It's in the chat. Okay.
So folks who are curious about following up on that conversation, about the toolkit, please find that in the chat. I know you mentioned Tamara, Carl. Tamara, are you here? Oh yes, you've just raised your hand. Please join us for 3 minutes. We'd love to hear what you have to say.
I'll just build a little bit on some of the things Carl said, and also on some of the work that I've been doing on monitoring and evaluation for peace building more generally that maybe is relevant here. And one of the things that's come out of some of our more recent studies around how peace building has done monitoring and evaluation and some of the challenges that people have had speak to maybe three important things to consider for us. The first is the challenge of measuring the complexity of these types of phenomena and then translating that complexity to funders. A lot of the pressure that seems to be a difficulty for people doing this work in the field is again figuring out how to track all of the different potential contributors and dimensions that may change, but translating that to funders in terms of the resources that are needed to do that. And maybe another piece to add on to that is another challenge in that translation to funders is the importance for this work to be framed as long-term interventions rather than short-term interventions. That so often the pressures of governments and funders is to produce 2 or 3 year projects, and clearly this work is not doable on that kind of scale. That the only time that you might actually see the changes that matter are if you can have it framed on a longer time scale. And if we only focus on the short term, both in terms of our monitoring and evaluation and in terms of our design, we actually run the risk of exacerbating problems rather than relieving them. And maybe the final thing I'll just throw out is that I think the importance that is now being placed in peace building more broadly on the recognition of monitoring and evaluating changes at the local level. That ultimately peace building is all about working locally, and so how do we grasp that? How do we design for that? How do we capture those kinds of accomplishments and then translate that knowledge back into that next phase of designing?
Thank you, Tamara. I think maybe while we're on this topic of complexity, sort of like navigating the complexity around monitoring and evaluation, I saw there's a comment in the chat from Timothy Ellinger. I don't know if you want to speak up for a minute or two. You've shared a resource about complex systems evaluation.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. So a number of years ago, the Alliance for Peacebuilding had a sort of complex systems affinity group that I was part of. And out of that, we came a couple of sort of papers we wrote out of that. And what was interesting is I was approached, someone had found that with the Network for the Evaluation of One Health, which was a cost project out of the European Union. Because as the previous speaker was talking about, the One Health initiative, which was largely veterinarians sort of working with complex local food systems and agriculture, really taking a holistic approach to understanding how the identity and the culture of people working at the local level was profoundly important for human health. We're having the difficulty of communicating how sort of these sort of complex interventions of working with people and their food systems was really promoting a holistic, healthy system. And they felt that their challenge of communicating this to politicians in terms of funding systems was very similar to that of peace builders. How do you evaluate the non-event? How do you demonstrate that your work is preventing something from happening? And so I worked with them, and we incorporated a number of the concepts that we were developing as part of the systems and complexity workgroup with the Alliance for Peacebuilding into the reference that I posted in the into the chat. And looking at economic, social, cultural, gender, all of these issues that are really sort of part of this sort of complex web of ecosystem goods and services, which I really have a problem with the way that it's traditionally represented, where you have sort of supporting systems, allowing for regulatory systems, offering for provisioning and culture at the top. It makes it like culture is sort of a donut pushed on the top. But in fact, these are so intimately connected in terms of how culture really influences what we need and what we look at and are co-evolved. So that book has some really great references in it if people want to look at that. it's available free for download at the link that I provided. So thank you very much, Annika.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. Okay, let's see. I'm stopping my timer here. I noticed that we have another question in the chat from Becca Sears about wanting to unwrap a specific dilemma. Going to more green energy options like solar panels often goes hand in hand with requiring more metals and other resources. How do we ensure this extraction isn't bringing further harm to other communities and the natural environment? I wonder, Philippe, if you're there, if you might want to speak to this. Philippe Lebien?
Yes, hi. Yes, we just published a paper on environmental research letters. I don't know if it was a segue or not, but I've been working with colleagues at the University of Barcelona and McGill, and there's this great resource called Environmental Justice Atlas that they put together that essentially maps out and documents and reports on about 3,300 conflicts around the world at the moment. That often relates to mega projects, agro-industrial ventures, etc. And so for that particular paper, we looked at fossil fuel and non-fossil fuel projects. So we didn't look into mining so-called green minerals, but we looked at many of those sustainable energy projects. And what came out really clearly is many of the communities are not very happy with these either. So it provides a bit of a dilemma as we're moving towards energy transition. But the findings really are quite clear in saying, well, let's not think that moving towards renewable energy is going to bring out peace within communities and between communities and local authorities and corporations at that local level. This is far from being the case. We see a lot of resistance, for example, to wind farms. I've got a colleague, Alex Dunlap, who's done great work in Mexico and shows that some of the companies involved in wind power are no different than narco traffickers in using, sicarios, hitmen, to kill social leaders opposing wind farms that will displace population, etc. So when we're looking at the minerals that are going to feed into this, whether it's copper, cobalt, lithium, many rare earth, etc., we're not going to see many differences from other types of minerals that have been exploited. And so what I'm really afraid is what we're going to see is essentially not only energy addition, meaning renewables coming on top of fossil fuels and providing a power-hungry world, but we're also going to see mining addition, meaning that new mines will be opening in new areas in order to track for this mineral. So not to be a advocate of degrowth automatically, but you see where I'm going. So of course, a lot of people, including within mining companies, are very attentive to these things because the costs are very high when a project is stalled or canceled because the conflict with the community has escalated all the point to, for example, people being executed and major blockades taking place. So I know that the industry has been working on this for about 2-3 decades now. I am, I'm quite impressed with what they've been achieved, but there are so many places in the world where we see this conflict still taking place. So I'll provide some, resources in the chat if people are interested to pursue that, and I'll add my own 2 cents later, or maybe now, if I can hold the floor with regard to the voices that are missing. I think one of the voices that is crucial and that is missing, and I was just scanning very quickly, who is attending this session, and I was noticing that we do not have voices from China. And China represents, as you know, 1/3 of anthropogenic emissions. It represents by far the main leader of mega projects around the world, with the Belt and Road Initiative that involves, to the last count, I think it was close to 800 mega projects in about 80 countries, okay? And that has led to a lot of conflict exacerbation. Many of those mega projects actually don't even count all the inputs that come into, so from mining, etc. So I spent the last year traveling to a number of places and really seeing a lot of resentment on the part of local communities. Of course, some people do get jobs, but a lot of people lose their land, lose their livelihoods, lose their culture, and become very much at odds with their own host authorities. So even in a country like Ecuador, for example, which has a very progressive constitution, as you all know, we've seen things that we should not be seeing in places like that, where high biodiversity areas with indigenous people are basically cornered into accepting and being imposed those kinds of projects, and leading to a lot of resentment. And it was no surprise that a few months after I visited, we saw major indigenous social movement taking place in the capital city, trying to demand change. And I think we'll see more and more a politics of environmental defense that becomes more radicalized, precisely because there's not enough movement, and the momentum that, for example, the BRI is imposing on the world at the moment, although it is slightly paused because of COVID, is nasty. And I'm very afraid that after COVID is kind of over in a few months, when slowly the vaccination program is going to roll out, we're going to see economic recovery program. As you know, economic recovery programs have been already mapped out, and by far they promote brown type of economic recovery, not green type. Okay, it's about 1/5, apart from the European Union, to make it short. Everybody's going for the dirty way of recovering from this crisis. And so I'm very afraid that this new decade we're engaging in, the 2020s, is going to be particularly nasty in a context where social movements are very strong. There is a lot of contentions at play, and there is also a big geopolitical game that is unfolding. So this does not occur very well. Sorry to be a bit of a doomsayer. Okay, thank you.
Well, sometimes we have to get the full picture. So I'm putting into the chat actually a resource that I recently found about the peace and security and or lack thereof conversation on the Belt and Road Initiative that was done by Bread for the World. So that's just an interesting resource for any of you who are more curious about the peace and security side. It definitely doesn't integrate the environment side. So I understand your point there. I'm wondering, I have a couple of more. Oh yeah, we have a request in the chat, Philippe, for you to send the link to your paper. So thanks for putting that in. Yep. And I'm wondering if we have any other comments sort of on this topic. I have another place I would be curious to move the conversation, but I want to make space in case anybody else wants to come in here. Again, you can put your name in the chat, raise your Zoom hand by clicking on participants at the bottom, or you can raise your hand in the window. I don't hopefully see most of you. Okay, well, I'll just, okay. Yeah, I think maybe Philippe offered us an interesting, oh, we have another, oh yeah, that's linked. I think Philippe maybe offered us an interesting segue in the conversation, which is if we're getting sort of the negative or pessimistic outlook of the environmental peace building landscape, our third question is, how can we promote and support international action to build a better future through environmental peace building? And I know we've also through this been talking about the interrelationship between the local, the voices that are missing, but also the international levelers. I believe, Miguel, you touched on that. But I'm curious if anybody here has any thoughts that they would like to add on that question, which is, again, how can we promote and support international action to build a better future through environmental peace building?
Do you mind if I jump in?
Please.
It's not going to be very well articulated, but I'll try. I think, I think there's so much, I think there's a pretty robust focus on the local within the environmental peace building community. And that obviously can be grown, and we can be telling the stories better and making sure that we have more diverse representation in the discussions of environmental peace building. But I do think that it's really important that we continue to focus on international efforts around environmental peace building and addressing conflict and building peace with an eye to how natural resource management and environmental change play a role in both the driving instability, but also in the importance of including natural resource management and environment in our responses. And I think that there's a little bit of a disconnect between those two discussions. And so if I had more time for my original 3 minutes, I think I would have added a third point, which is thinking across scales of decision making and connecting, and connecting these conversations. I mean, it's important to have these local projects, but if US and China go to war, like that matters too, right? And so how can we make sure that sort of we're also focusing on those levels of decision making. So I would just make that point. It's not necessarily answering the question, it's just saying that we should promote and support. But I think that I would go back to my original point that telling the stories of the impact on the ground and making sure that we're connecting across decision makers that are working at different levels of governance and looking how to scale up some of the efforts that are going on at the local level and plug them into international efforts is really important.
Thank you. And I see Carla has made a comment in the chat. And for those of you who may be camera shy, please also feel free to type your answers in the chat. You're very welcome to do that. Did I see your hand up, Timothy, as well?
Yes, I was starting to type it in the chat as well, but I could say it. Lauren, your comments they're really spot on. I mean, my background in environmental management and adaptive governance, there are these concepts of cross-scale and sort of cross-sector brokers. And there's so many of these people that I've been finding are really doing peace building in a lot of different sectors. You know, like I mentioned, the One Health initiative there. And I think one of the things that people who really come from the peace building sector here who know how to sort of facilitate the conversations between these different brokers really have the opportunity on a global scale to sort of build, align collective interests for collective action, I think, on some of these issues. Because there's a tremendous amount of peace building work being done by people who don't think of themselves as peace builders. But if we can identify those brokers and find ways to facilitate these global conversations, I think that's a real potential to create sort of a self-organizing system of environmental peace building among these different, very, very well-intentioned people, but have very diverse and different languages. And we need to have sort of sectoral translators who can kind of help that move forward. So thank you for your comments.
It's an interesting way to phrase it as sectoral translators, because often we do need that. And in our quick briefing for our 3 speakers right before this, I even mentioned we'll likely have people in this conversation who come from more peace building backgrounds, who come from more environmental backgrounds. So let's try to avoid as much use of sort of overly technical jargon as we can, or because knowing that we all do speak a slightly different language, so to speak. Let's see, we have a comment in here. I'm getting interested in generating international qualitative research projects that encompass philosophies that include language, dreams, and stories from a cultural perspective to co-create environmental peace building. I would get interested in following that work, Aniko, so please keep us in the loop. I see a hand up from Ahmed. Please join us.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm Ahmed from Chemonics. Just from the experience of working on Yemen, like there are 3 elements I wanted to add to the conversation. The first one I see is to prevent during conflicts. So in Yemen, for instance, there is an oil tanker that is trapped at the Red Sea that carries thousands of tons of oil that potentially any day will spill, and the conflicting parties are instrumentalizing it for the war benefits. So by raising awareness in terms of the level of UN Security Council intervention and member states who are active, and just by being vocal in terms of how conflicting parties need to respect the damage that is caused on the climate by conflict, directly or indirectly, I think that's one element. And then the second element is tied, unfortunately, to the long-term requirement to address these problems, is that often climate conflicts are tied with land disputes, particularly with climate change and rains and the sources of water. And so it's through resolving disputes over land, but it's tied to the nature of conflict affected by climate change. And the third and final point is that it's also tied to international investment, multilateral companies. The same thing in Yemen, particularly, because I'm working on it at the moment. We see oil companies, there is leakage that affects the soil, affects the agriculture lands, and either causes increasing corruption or disputes amongst local communities who are benefiting from rents and, you know, providing security or getting jobs at these companies, and add to that the layer of conflict. But just to raise the awareness that there is both moral and interest associated with foreign investment, that international actors need to, you know, be there and reduce the negative impacts of foreign investments that are happening. So these are the 3 points from my side. Thanks.
Here I was taking notes, so I couldn't unmute myself. That's an interesting. Thank you for bringing in the Yemeni perspective. I think it's important that we continue to talk across it. There's this interconnectivity between the scales, as everyone is sort of coming back to. We continue to have folks coming in the door, so I just want to also provide a welcome to those of you who are joining us. Thank you so much for being here. What we're doing here today is really having a conversation, so anybody is welcome to raise their hand to jump in. I will go ahead and repost the questions in the chat because I haven't done that in a little while. We've just recently been having a discussion around how the question number 3, which is how we can promote and support international action to build a better future through environmental peace building. I'm curious, I know that we have some students here in the conversation, whether they are bachelor students, master's students, PhD students. I'm curious if there's anybody here. Be careful, because I know who some of you are, and I may just feel like I want to call on your names. I'm wondering if there are any students here who want to share sort of from the perspective of what they're seeing, because I think often sometimes so many of us can also be steeped in these conversations and feel like we're, you know, right up against the elephant, and we can't really get the perspective. So it's also really important that we are integrating the perspective of young people who may be new to the conversation or have different sort of relationships and lived experience. So I'm wondering if any of you, I don't know, Elsa, can I call on you? I saw you made a comment in the chat. Elsa, do you want to speak up for a minute or two?
Yeah, I can jump in because I guess from the student point of view, and also someone who's been new to get into sort of the formal nature of this field, but was sort of envisioning these ideas before knowing that like environmental peace building as something organizations are claiming to do even existed, is that it seems like there are a lot of organizations, especially at the local level and the grassroots level, who are doing things that could be classified as environmental peace building, but they wouldn't necessarily identify that as such, and they're not plugged in to these kinds of conversations or aware of other organizations or groups who are doing similar work. And so I think there's a huge opportunity to, you know, seek out people who are already doing similar things and maybe bring them together and bridge those gaps. Because the reality is we do want to see international impact, but the local level is sort of the place where this transformative action and dialogue and environmental action can take place. But if we connect that into this sort of international network, I think it can be a way to scale that up. So for example, when I was doing research in Israel and Palestine, there were groups like EcoPeace who were very aware that they were doing environmental peace building and plugged into these networks. But there were other organizations who were doing similar work and who weren't making those connections, and they were working at a really grassroots local level, being very effective, and bringing them into the conversation could be, I think, really critical.
Thank you, Elsa, and thanks for letting me put you on the spot like that.
Yeah.
We have another comment. Bethany, I don't know if you want to speak up. To build off Elsa's point, connecting with local groups and building local partnerships can also do a lot to increase local community buy-in in regions where they may be mistrustful of international organizations. So again, kind of playing with that interconnectivity between the levels. This actually brings me back to something that I saw in the chat maybe 20 minutes ago, which was Marla. You mentioned a documentary that you are working on. I don't know, Marla, if you're still here. Maybe we've missed you.
I'm just unmuting.
Oh, okay. Hi. Great. I wonder if you want to speak for a minute about that and also about the storytelling aspect, because I think that's a good place where this can kind of plug in. I think storytelling is one of those sort of essential human experiences that allows us to bring people into conversations, as Elsa suggested. Oh, I think you're on mute again. Hold on. There we go. There we go.
Okay. Thanks for having me and for this opportunity. Normally my daughter would be here. She's the actual filmmaker. She's a Gen Z filmmaker who started at a very young age. We both belong to the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace and have been very involved for the last 10 years with them. So this is where she got her start as an activist. So peace has always been her core issue, but she, being a young Gen Z, is also very passionate about the environment. So her new film is about bridging the two movements to find out how we can collectively come together in a unified way to deal with both these existential threats that are really affecting her generation. So I'm so happy to hear from Elsa on the fact that, that there is this interest from youth, and we're looking for stories right now. So if anyone knows of anybody who's working in the field of environmental peacekeeping, have them get in touch.
Well, I think you're probably in the right place. So if anybody, I don't know, Marla, if you're comfortable with sharing your contact information, or if there's
a place we have already in the
okay,
chat.
Great. Yeah.
Again.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. So for those of you who are here, if you have ideas of stories that you want to connect them with, I think that's brilliant. We have a question, specifically in Canada or internationally?
This is this will be stories around the world, but due to COVID, there's obviously a lack of production on getting out to countries internationally and even within Canada at the moment. So we are gearing up for the moment that we can, but in the meantime becoming very creative in how to collect the stories. So it could be that you send us your story, but to also point out that we're building a website, we're building a movement with this. So we're doing a lot of social impact educational outreach with the film. That normally the film would come first and then you do it, but we're doing it in the reverse way, so that by the time the film comes out, we've built the movement and we can build it stronger. So if you'd like to send us your contact information as well, or sign up on our newsletter, we'll keep you posted.
Sure thing. I'll put my email in the chat. No problem.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. I've seen a couple people turn their cameras on in the last 30 seconds, and I don't know if that's I want to speak, or if you're just turning your cameras on. But I want to remind you that this is an interactive conversation, so please feel free to jump in. So I'm curious now, we've talked a lot about and gotten some good examples of voices that are missing. And we've also had some interesting conversation about how we can promote action at the international levels and the interplay sort of between different levels and sort of across sectors. I'm wondering if there are, the second question was, what are the key trends of the environmental peacebuilding conversation? I'm wondering, for those of you maybe who spend a lot of time working on environmental peacebuilding, so I know we have a lot of folks here, are there key trends that you see that we might be missing?
A more specific question, if I could toss that in. I'm an undergrad student. Does anyone have experience working with intersectional theory alongside environmental peacebuilding, or is there any overlap with those two, thoughts and ideas?
Mm-hmm. Deep, do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, well, certainly not my area of expertise, but I would say yes, there's definitely, at least within geography, a lot of attention put to that at all levels, by the way, whether it's the study, the recruitment, who is able to speak. Soon I'll be shutting down. Personally, I'm certainly not very intersectional, unfortunately, although we all are in some extent. So yeah, I think, understanding the voices. So the project that I do at the moment is on environmental and land defenders, for example. And a lot of attention is being put on understanding intersectionality of indigeneity, rurality, agrarianness, LGBTQ, because it links with also social movements, of course, gender, etc. And so there's a lot of attention paid to this. In particular, I look much more at the conflict side, but how certain types of intersectionality are used in order to criminalize, ostracize, establish prejudice, stereotype people, etc. So we've had very famous cases with even the case of Berta Cáceres, probably the most important and well-known environmental defender who was killed in recent years in 2016 in Honduras. She was accused of having raped a young boy by the government. So just to give you an idea of how far people will go in instilling doubt that she was not the good mother that one could expect, but on the contrary, a child abuser, an indigenous child abuser, backward with kind of, So, what does that bring us in terms of peace building? I think it's looking a lot at what kind of avenues for progress can we find among communities that have experienced this, this prejudice, etc., and how do they advance themselves a culture of peace, if you want, within their own practices and the way they approach other groups, etc. So in certain society that has been very progressive. Canada has made in the past 10 years, I would say, and in other societies, on the contrary, we've seen death penalties being imposed, a rhetoric of violence and criminalization and ostracization. So yeah, again, it's not my area of expertise, so I'll let somebody speak.
I don't know if there's anybody else who wants to speak to this, or Julianne, if you have other resources that you found about intersectionality on other subjects that the environmental peace builders may not know about, maybe that could also be helpful to put in the chat as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Philippe. I mean, I have just a very, very brief literature review for a class that I'm in right now, and I found not too many options in terms of work that specifically address these two ideas coming together. So that was very interesting to hear about. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I would encourage you to turn your lit review into a little paper for a new journal. Environmental security.
Okay, any other topics that people feel are missing or questions that folks have? This is, I guess, kind of an ideal. Oh, please.
No, in our last conference in Irvine, thanks to the fantastic work, notably of Richard Matthews, we touch upon technology, and I think more and more we're going to see smart earth technologies bringing voices and a better understanding of the environment. And I think when we're going to be talking about environmental peace building in 20, 30, 50 years, it's going to be much more about this kind of relational process with the environment, where we will be able to better understand, listen, and communicate with non-human species that will allow us to maybe bring a level of consciousness about what a positive peace means for the environment, that nature can really realize its own potential. And that, as we all know, potential is realized through communication. Whether you look at the work of Amartya Sen or any corporation and the amount of money they put into marketing. And so when nature will really be able to better communicate with us, I think we'll hopefully reach a level of provide a sense of agency to nature that will transform our relationship, which is so predatory and so exploitative at the moment.
That's a much more hopeful picture. I think you were great about your last two comments being depressing towards the end.
I work on two sides, yes.
I think I have Carl's hand up.
Thank you. I was, in terms of other big picture things, there are things that I wanted to flag where I think we could use some development. One is this, how do we deal with complexity? And I think that the challenge here is that we see that it's complex, and you build out your framework, you build out your conceptual framework, you build out your data, and it becomes really unwieldy very quickly. And for dedicated researchers, I think that you know, you can make your way through that complexity, but I think that trying to think about how to conceptualize these complexities in more accessible ways and how to communicate that, I think is going to be very important. And some of it is then, what do we do about it? And are there ways of you know, adapting adaptive management, or but I think that embracing the complexity, but also noting that that generates its own challenges. The other thing that I want to come back to was this this question of scale and context. And I think there are very different views of what is environmental peace building, and how does it work, and what are the conceptual theories around that. And that is especially when one is talking about kind of localized conflict and structural violence on the one hand, and international armed conflict on the other. You have different disciplines that tend to focus on those. But if you actually sit down and kind of do a comparison, well, what are the grievances? Those look kind of similar. What are the proposed solutions? Look kind of similar too. And so I think there's a very interesting question about, to what extent does scale fundamentally matter, or is that more of a modest adaptation, or do you need to fundamentally think about it differently? And I don't think that we have had a rigorous analysis or dialogue around that. And I think it would be very interesting moving forward to get a better sense of how much does scale matter in what way.
Thank you. Yes, I think you've raised more questions and more food for thought that we desperately need to address, I think, as a community. So thank you very much. I am already looking at the clock, and I'm astonished to see that we somehow only have 9 minutes left. So I think by way of wrapping up, I'd love to just go through in the same order to our first 3 sort of speakers or folks who made an input. And I may ask that you take even less than 3 minutes if that's possible. And Miguel, we'll start with you. The prompt really being, where can we go from here after this conversation today?
Well, I guess we have to keep talking to each other and networking. And what we do actually at the Environmental Peacebuilding Association is thrilling, because we get to connect with practitioners, with researchers, with policymakers, people on the field, people on the academy. I wish we would have more links to private sector and communities, as I mentioned at the beginning. But I mean, it's really nice to, I think we should keep exchanging ideas. And one thing I wanted to mention is that, for instance, at the Global Green Growth Institute, we've engaged with the Korean Forestry Service for the Peace Forest Initiative, which is a newborn initiative connected with the UN land regulation community. So I guess we have to be bold. We have to keep pushing our boundaries and open our minds to connect between different disciplines, because this is the present need that we are able to, as Carl said, build simplicity, or be able to convey a message out of all this complexity. So I guess that would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Miguel. Lauren.
Thanks, Annika. I just want to say that it's really a pleasure to see and hear from everybody on the call today. I would go back to my original points. I would say be a champion of environmental peace building. So recruit champions, but also be a champion. I think there's a lot of discussions that are very related to environmental change that go on in, across all of our work, across our studies, that provide a really great entry point to introduce broader audiences to the field of environmental peace building and say, hey, there is actually an area of this that is very well aligned with this other conversation that could help create a more robust platform for different projects. I had another point, but I think I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Munini, are you still with us? I think I saw you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
yes.
sure. I'm here. I think for me, it's just to reiterate what has been said, and what I hear coming across is about partnerships. And we need to look for points of engagement, especially with the non-traditional peace actors, as we would call them. And this also brings the voices that we're saying, where are these different voices, where are these unique voices? The more we get out of our comfort zone, the more we are able to reach out to those new concepts or those diverse concepts and those fresh ideas that will come into the field to enrich the work that we continue doing. And that also takes me to the point of having regional players. We've also heard a lot about the levels of leadership that we need to engage. Regional players that help interlink between the international and the local. They are very, I think they are critical and they are important to help the two leadership. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm seeing some more comments coming in, and I'm really appreciating those of you who are also engaging the chat. By way of, I think, final word, I will turn it back over to Pivy.
Thank you. It's kind of, now I feel that everything that I had thought to say now has been said by the others, by by Miguel, by Lorena, and Munini, and also in the chat. But first, I would like to thank you for providing me new insights, new thoughts, and new understanding. And it has been very enriching experience for me, and hopefully for all of you as well, not only to me. And I greatly appreciate the challenges that come with the complexities of the issues, with the measuring impact, thinking through scales, working through the scales. But I also think that all that is possible, so we can work through those and we can find solutions. And I think what was said, that one of the key things is to connect like we have connect today across the actors, across the stakeholders, across the scales and across the countries. I think that's one of the key things that we need to continue be doing in the future as well. And forming those partnerships also with people that we don't yet know, or that we perhaps didn't thought that could be our partners, or on this way. And I think one great way for people to engage is through the I'm just going to put it here in the boxes, is the Environmental Peacebuilding Association. And not necessarily as a member, but it's an immense resource out there that you can use to get more information, to get to know people. And if you want to join the associations, there are lots of resources. There are different interest groups that you can join and connect with people across countries, across sectors, across different stakeholders. So that I think could be a good place to look. With these words, I would like to thank you everybody again for joining us today, being with us and sharing your thoughts and your experience and your wisdom. I'm very grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Baby. Thank you so much, Annika.
Thank you for being here, everyone. I just posted a link. I'll be posting a bit of a summary in a week or two of the conversation, along with all of the resources that you've shared. But as Päivi said, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.